Okay, so far on Bike Psych, the weather has been fabulous. You probably thought, where is this magical place with the blue skies all the time? If you've been watching the series. Well, unfortunately, it's not always like that, although it often is. But today we've got a very wet, rainy, horrible day. But I'm still coming out on my bike. So I really wanted to do a Bike Psych. So this means that there might be a few bits of water on the camera lens. You're going to hear a lot of spray noises. I hope it's okay. Anyway, we're doing our best. The camera is waterproof, thankfully. But anyway, we'll see how we get on. So today I'm going to talk about charisma. So this is a really interesting subject that lots of people have spent many lifetimes, or lots of people have spent a lot of time studying the subject of charisma. What is it? How can you get it? Is it a good thing? Is it a neutral thing? Is it a bad thing potentially? So I can't answer all of those questions in a half an hour Bike Psych. But I thought I'd talk about charisma and perhaps a little bit about how you can get it or how you can be more charismatic, and maybe how that fits a little bit into leadership in general. So the theme of today is charisma, how to get it. The word charisma comes from a Greek word, which I'm not a Greek scholar, so I don't really know how to pronounce it, but it looks like something like charisma, very similar to the way we say it. It has a KH at the front of it. What does it mean then? Well, it's basically a divine gift. So the idea of somebody who's charismatic is someone who has like a divine gift of being able to influence people or motivate people. So it's seen as, a kind of spiritual thing, or at least that was its early meaning. So Max Weber is quoted a lot on charisma, and he talks about this quality that not all men possess, and he talks about supernatural or extraordinary qualities. Now it's significant that he says not all men, because of course this is one of those elements of leadership that I suppose could be described as being part of the, in inverted commas, great man theory of leadership. So that was very popular around the sort of turn of the 20th century and before, really. But history is a reflection of these great men who made great changes, and these men are often described in ways that we would probably know now as, or describe now as, being charismatic. There is clearly a link to religion in its early form of what this word meant. Even now we might talk about charismatic Christians. So some sort of evangelical sects in the US particularly would describe themselves as charismatic. So again, these gifts of God that they see as being demonstrated by things like speaking in tongues or so on. So this is a secular Bike Psych, so I'm not going to talk about religion, but obviously it's important to recognise that this word has some religious roots, if you like. But now we tend to talk about charisma as being in a package that relates to leadership. So I've mentioned before that I develop courses, training courses for managers, and I do a lot of these online. So I'm currently developing an online advanced management course, and a big part of that is transformational and charismatic leadership. Now, I'm not going to go into all of that, there's so much to talk about, but these days most people see charismatic qualities or charismatic leadership as being a subsection of a wider set of characteristics called transformational leadership. So I'm not going to go any further than that on that one. Suffice to say that the overlap between what people describe as transformational and what people describe as charismatic is huge. So in some of the surveys that I'll talk about briefly, particularly the CK leadership questionnaire, Conger and Kanungo, correlations are so tight between what's considered to be charismatic and the rest of transformational leadership as to essentially be talking about the same thing. So we can talk about transformational and charismatic as being pretty much the same thing, at least statistically, on questionnaires. So what are we talking about? Well, there's some interesting work on charismatic leadership that relates to, I think it's House Shamir. I can't remember the other name. I'll put the quotes up on the screen. But they talk about the idea of self-concept and the self-concept theory, and this is related to charismatic leadership. So the first thing to remember, is that charisma is entirely in the eyes of the beholder. So this means basically that it's all about how, if you're talking about yourself, how you project yourself, or how you or your behaviour is being received by the other. So you might think you're a fantastically charismatic person in a way that's meaningless, because it only makes sense in relation to what somebody else thinks about you. So, if you think you're charismatic, meaningless, what do other people think, is the first thing. So in a way we kind of have to start with the other person, the person that is either going to look at you as being charismatic or not. So that's why we're going to start with self-concept theory. And it's the self-concept of the follower. If you're talking about a leader-follower relationship, it's the self-concept of the follower that's most important here. And there are two precepts that are stated here, and one of them is that individuals have a hierarchy of identities. So we see ourselves, your followers will see themselves as multiple things, if you like. They may be professionals, they may be salespeople, they may be mothers, they may be fathers, they may be grandparents, they may be siblings. They're probably all of these things, and they are able to hold all of these identities in a hierarchy, and there'll be some things that are more important to them than others. So for many of us who have children, the idea of being a parent is a kind of core identity that is very, very strong. Other identities might be a bit looser. So at one point I was an IT professional. I no longer see myself as that anymore. So that identity is kind of easy to shift, if you like, or easier. So anyway, we have these multiple identities. Some are more important than others. That's why it's a hierarchy. And yeah, we arrange them in whatever order we think is most important. Okay, next. Second precept in this self-concept theory is that people have a certain amount of self-esteem and they want to keep it. So feelings of self-worth, importance, if you like, feeling that they're important to somebody in some way, that they count, they matter, they have skills, they are valued. All of these things kind of make up that self-concept precept of self-esteem. So those are the two precepts then that we need to work with. So if we're a manager, or if we're somebody that wants to be seen as charismatic, then in a way we've got to appeal to those self-concepts. So what a charismatic leader would do, if you relate them to those two precepts, they might link the achievement of the team goals, let's say, with the identity of the team member. So if I'm a leader of a team member and they're very good at, let's say, they're very friendly, I will look at that quality, and if that person sees themselves as friendly, if they identify as a friendly person, then I'll try to kind of adopt that idea and align it to the team's goals. So let's say I might say to the individual, look, one thing I really value, one thing we really need in this team is somebody that has that friendliness, because that helps keep the team together, that helps to, you're able to sell things to people, good things that matter to them, because you care about them, you're friendly, you're a good listener, and these things are valuable. And ideally you want to align that with the team's goals. So clearly if your goals are not aligned with the individual's identity, then you don't sort of focus on that. You focus on the things that the individual sees as part of their identity. So that's one of the ways that you align your team goals to the identity of the individual, and that in itself makes people see you as more charismatic. Okay, second thing we said, second precept, is that people have this inordinate desire to maintain their self-esteem. So this is clearly linked, but again, if you can align the team's goals to the skills and the abilities and so on of the individual, that of course raises their self-esteem. Also, if you're able to help the individual to see their importance to the team and why they matter, and what you think about them, how you value them, how you see them as important, that also helps to increase their self-esteem. And this is not a one-off kind of do it once and that's it. This is an ongoing process. So that's something that the charismatic leader does. So let's cover those two again, those two precepts. So if people have these two precepts, that is, one, they have some core identities, if you like, and that they want to feel valued, which is essentially what these two precepts boil down to, then as a charismatic leader, you are focusing the team goals and you're aligning those goals with the person's identity and feelings of self-esteem. And it might be about highlighting the things that are really important to the team and not highlighting the others that aren't. And in that way, you increase alignment with the goal, and of course, they see themselves as tightly wrapped up in this mission, in this goal. So that's one of the things that charismatic leaders do that can be very powerful. Now, in a moment, I'm going to talk about some of the risks associated with this, because clearly charismatic leaders are sometimes dangerous. And part of the reason why they're dangerous is because, of course, you can very easily align people's sense of self and self-worth to causes that are not ethical. And that's why you can get some pretty horrendous characters who you could describe as charismatic but are unethical and do horrible things and lead their followers to do some horrible things. Now, before I go on, what I've just said could lead us into a bit of a rabbit hole, because there are some definitions of charismatic leadership that completely deny that statement that I've just made. I would say that the word itself, charismatic, has to include morals and ethics. I don't really want to get into that argument here. I think most of us, though, can see that there's a risk to the sorts of behaviours that I've just described and getting people to follow to do things that are unethical. So yeah, I'm very interested in cults, as you may well know, and belief systems where they followed individuals, and of course that's often where it starts, is through a charismatic leader helping people find meaning in a message and helping them align perhaps long held beliefs about themselves with a new goal that suddenly seems to make sense to them. So there are dangers there, I think it's important to note. Okay, so what else can we say about charismatic leadership? So the other big name, so most of what we've talked about so far, just going to watch this guy, cute. Most of what we're seeing so far is research carried out over the last sort of 30-40 years. Most of it's been done through questionnaire data. So this is really where followers are asked a bunch of questions about what they think about their leader and what they think charisma is and how charismatic they think their leader is, and so on. And they do some statistical analysis on this, and basically what they're looking for are correlations between, common factors, if you like, common characteristics of charisma. And so that's where this research has been done. Now, I'm personally quite sceptical about a lot of research that's done through questionnaires. I think there's some value in it, but I think it's easy to overplay the importance of questionnaire research, because at the end of the day, you're just taking a snapshot of what people thought the answers to those questions were on that day, and it's not always easy for them to rank this person on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 7 or a Likert scale or something. So I'm not alone in this skepticism. One of the most interesting names in charisma research at the moment is called I think it's Yanis Antonakis. I could have got that wrong. I'll put his name up on the screen. And I thoroughly recommend, once you've watched this, not now, once you finish this, doing a search on YouTube for some of his speeches and his lectures, and he did a particularly interesting one with the British Psychological Society, of which I'm a member, and you can listen to his entire lecture there. Now, some of it gets into quite a bit of detail, but what's interesting about him is he's an experimental psychologist, at least now he is. He's done his work with the questionnaires, and I suppose, like I've just described, he became increasingly worried about the conclusions that we were drawing from survey research, and so he's taken an experimental approach. And one of the most interesting experiments he's done is around signalling. So the way he describes it is that charismatic people, what they do is they signal by their behaviour, by their communication in particular, certain things that make people have confidence in them and make them think that they're charismatic. So I'm going to talk about some of those that I can remember. Now, obviously, again, the nature of Bike Psych is that I'm on my bike. I don't stop off to have a look at my books. So this is all stuff from my memory, but so if I get stuff wrong, I do put it up on the screen. So one of the things that he says that charismatic people do is the way they communicate, they kind of take risks. So they signal that they are risk takers. Now, if you're a risk taker, that says to people, I'm confident in myself, I'm confident that I can take this risk and I can get out of it if there's a problem. And that builds confidence in the individual and in the leader. And so by doing things like perhaps sometimes doing unorthodox things, so unorthodox behaviour as a leader, humour, and taking personal risks where if things go wrong, then the leader herself or himself has a problem. These are characteristics that tend to make the follower think that they are, charismatic. Now again, this is obviously by nature it's a risky strategy, and it may also cause damage or harm to the individual, to the follower. So again, this is where ethics comes in. Very important that we consider that too. But that is certainly one of the ways, at least according to the research, that charismatic individuals manage to convince followers to follow them. And another one is really important, especially for me and Evil Sheep, which is my daughter and my production company, film production, is through storytelling. So charismatic leaders tend to use stories to create value-laden or values-laden messages. So a bit like some of the religious figures in history, they use parables and stories. You can probably think of those yourself if you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist. All of those figures used parables and stories to get their point across, and it's one of the signature features of charismatic people. They don't just give you the facts, they don't just tell you how it is, they give you a story, and they use the story to frame the present. So they use the story to frame what's going on. Now, I've talked about sense making before, and this is why sense making is such an important area of psychological research, because if you think about, if that's how we understand the world, interpret the world, and then make decisions about what to do next through sense making, then that's a powerful tool to wield if you're a charismatic leader. And again, of course, there are dangers. So I suppose one of the important things from this Bike Psych is if you're a leader, then of course charisma is a powerful, useful tool, if you like, to lead, but you also need to wield it ethically and morally. Without an ethical compass, it's very dangerous, and you can lead people literally over a cliff or figuratively over a cliff, but also literally. So if you're a leader, you know, charisma is powerful, use it with care. But perhaps even more useful for you if you're a follower, and most of us are, or a few of us are leaders with no direct report and nobody that we report to. So most of us will have a manager, a boss, a leader. Even if we don't at work, we might think of political leaders or thought leaders. So if we're a follower of any kind, whether that be as a subordinate in a company, a member of a congregation in a religion, a member of any sort of tribe online, if we have a leader, it's important to recognise the tools that charismatic individuals use. Now, if they're telling you things, they're telling you things, giving you instruction that is good for you and good for the wider good, okay. But it's important to be careful that you recognise those techniques, because it could be you're just being the victim of a charismatic leader who doesn't have your best interests at heart, or indeed anyone's other than themselves. And we could list people like that over and over again in history. So, you know, I'm talking about charisma. I didn't invent the concept. The ideas are out there. There's quite a big body of research. There's a questionnaire that you can take to see how charismatic you are. I'll put the link on that. I think you have to pay, but you can do it. There's some really useful tools to help you manage people effectively and lead people effectively, but I think caution is required, and it's important to get the ethics right. And of course also, if you are a follower, make sure that you are not going to be the victim of a rogue charismatic leader. Okay, so I think that's as much as I can remember on that subject. As I mentioned, I'm currently developing a course. I'll probably put that on the platform called Udemy, and you can look at the course. Lots more information on that. But anyway, I hope you found that useful and interesting. If you've got some thoughts about charisma or anything I've talked about, please let me know in the comments section. Please subscribe, and please like if you like. Thank you, and stay safe.